What is happening, everyone? The football therapist back. Been a little bit busy these last few weeks, but ready to record a lot of videos. Today we're talking about Dynasty rookie rankings at the quarterback position for your superflex leagues. These are going to be very important. Let's break down that intro. So here it is, guys, my tiered list for all of the quarterbacks except Trevor Lawrence. He's the consensus #1 guy, safest quarterback in Jacksonville, elite upside. So he's going to be going #1 in almost every single superflex league that you probably see. So I didn't want to really talk about him, but I wanted to talk about these tiers and these players within those tiers. And for me, my #2 guy for most of the offseason has been Trey Lance. Landing in San Francisco is a dream come true. They're the most equipped team for a quarterback to really have high-end fantasy success. George Kittle is there. They got young wide receivers in Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk. They have a great coach in Kyle Shanahan that gets the most out of his players. Really good offensive line. Those running backs, they rotate them in and everyone succeeds. And I think Trey Lance is going to add another dimension to this team. He has that high rushing upside. So to me, he's going to be the #2 overall player in superflex leagues for me for the rookies. I don't really think Wilson or Fields can jump him, but if something drastic occurs, we'll definitely reassess later in the offseason. But for right now, post-draft, I am the most hyped about Trey Lance. He's been my guy, and he's going to be my guy in most of my leagues. Now, Wilson and Fields, I kind of go back and forth with these guys. Fields, to me, is the more talented player for fantasy football. He has a higher rushing upside. He's very accurate. Landing in Chicago, though, feels good short term, but I'm a little worried about it long term. I mean, looking at the Jets, they've kind of already started their rebuild. They brought in the new regime of coaches with Robert Saleh. They're really trying to build up their roster, where Chicago is kind of in no man's land. I mean, Allen Robinson's playing on the franchise tag. We don't know if he'll be back next year. Ryan Pace, he could be gone. Matt Nagy, he could be gone next year. So while right now this season Fields definitely looks more appealing, long term, this Chicago Bears organization could really be changing a lot of things and have to rebuild around Fields. So that's why right now I'm a little hesitant to put Fields above Wilson. I think the Jets are going to be the better team over the next 2 to 3 years. I think Fields is the more talented quarterback, but the Jets already started putting weapons around Wilson. They got Elijah Moore, who's one of my favorite rookies. They drafted another offensive lineman, Elijah Vera Tucker, who's very versatile. So they're on the up and up, where Chicago, they kind of could be losing Allen Robinson in the offseason. They didn't bring in many weapons outside of him. David Montgomery is a good running back, but to me, right now, I think Wilson is a little bit safer than Fields in terms of the players around him and the organization around him. Mack Jones is kind of in a tier of his own. I don't think he has the upside as those three above him, but he's definitely safer than everyone below him. To me, I would grab him in the early second of my leagues. I think that because he doesn't have that elite upside as some of those other quarterbacks, I don't really want to risk a mid to even low first round pickup on him when you have these wide receivers who could be top 5 to 10 talents in the league. I think Mack Jones, to me, is a really safe quarterback, but he's going to be a quarterback too in that offense. They don't really have many weapons. I mean, I know they brought in Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry. They brought in Kendrick Bourne and Nelson Aguilar, but none of those players scream alpha to me. So it may be a little bit of a struggle for Mack Jones early if he gets some playing time. Potentially they could bring in someone next year to really boost this offense. But right now for me, I'm willing to risk an early second in Superflex, as the quarterback position is very valuable in those formats. But to me, he just doesn't feel as valuable as some of these other players. And this list here to me is really interesting. We got Kellen Monde, I mean, he went to Minnesota, which I really like that landing spot. Kirk Cousins, he has 2 years left on his contract, but if you look at the breakdown, if he doesn't get the job done this year, they could trade him next year and save $35 million against the cap. So to me, Mon has a path to potentially fighting for that starting position next season. I think that he can work his way up. He has a rushing upside. That offense has an elite young wide receiver in Justin Jefferson. They have Dalvin Cook, of course. There's always a risk with those running backs on their second-year contracts. Hopefully he could stay healthy enough for the next few years that if Mon gets a chance, it'll help him. And it's a really good organization. They always find people in the draft in the mid rounds to help with the line on the offensive side. Their defense is always quality. So I think this is a really good situation for Kellen Monde, and I think that he has a path to potentially being a fantasy asset in the future. So that's why I would potentially take a risk on him in the late second, especially in that tier where the running backs are weaker and the wide receivers kind of get a little iffy in that late second round. Now, the last two guys, Kyle Trask and Davis Mills, both of those guys have potential like Monde in the future to start. I mean, Mills, he went to the Texans early third round. Of course, Deshaun Watson, what happens there? We're still waiting on that. So there's a path for him to potentially play this year. But if they suck, they may just draft another quarterback next year in round one, try to rebuild. I don't know if Mills is the long-term answer. That's why he's last in this tier for me. But he could have some short-term value as a potentially mid QB2 if they could potentially play him if Watson isn't there and they use the pieces around him to help him out. Trask, he's more of a successor. Of course, he's going to sit behind Brady the next few years. It's a really good landing spot short term. He potentially could get in possibly in 2 to 3 years. It seems possibly later, depending on when Brady retires. Long term, it's still up in the air, but I'd be willing to draft him in the third if he's there. To me, though, again, these guys in this bottom tier, they're just flyers. They're just guys. They have a path to success potentially, but they're not someone who's really going to be a good fantasy asset for the intermediate years of these next 1 to 2 years. So let me know what you guys think. I mean, do you think that Lance should be the QB2 overall, the number 2 over player? What do you think about Wilson versus Fields? And do you think any of these guys are worth a risk in the third or late second round even? Thank you guys again, and I'll talk to you all soon.